Hi, it's Bev Matayoshi here on Dark Horse Matters, the show about passionate people going after it and making their dreams a reality. Thank you so much, those of you returning listeners. I really appreciate the support. It's so important to spread inspiration and positivity out there. And I truly believe that the guests I have on the show bring so much value and empowerment, which we need more of these days. And like and subscribe and definitely share because there's plenty more to go around. Today's guest, I met through my affiliation with RDH Magazine. I had the privilege to hear her speak at RDH Evolution last summer in Orlando, Florida. And those hygienists out there, if you are looking to grow and get to the next level in your career, I highly recommend RDH Evolution. It was just such an incredible experience. It was my first time last summer and I just loved it. And if you go in there not knowing what you want, you will definitely leave knowing what you want and knowing how to take the steps to get there, which was just super valuable. But so she truly has a gifted way to teach communication and how to navigate in the dental industry and in the business, in ways that is relatable. And she teaches in a way that makes you really understand how to do it in a way that's realistic. And so you can immediately take action. She is a partner at the Dentist Entrepreneur Organization and co-founder of the DEO MAP, which is an operating system built for growing dental companies. She is a dental hygienist at heart and a leader by nature, but above all the coaching that she does, she is a wife and an incredible mother. Please give a warm welcome to Josey Sewell, RDH Extraordinaire.
Could you just go ahead and introduce me wherever I go? Because that will make anybody feel amazing.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you and your time. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Oh, I am so excited. I love it when I get to meet other hygienists who are just paving the way in something that they're passionate and excited about. I think sometimes hygienists struggle to do something else or do something new because we're kind of rule followers. Like, this is what I do, and this is what I do in my hour, and I have to follow the process. And so I think that breaking those mental constructs, is sometimes tough. And so I love supporting other hygienists.
Yes, and I'm a very passionate one. And I love meeting other dental hygienists because we're just nerdy in the same way. We understand each other. But so let's dive right into it. Let's go into your journey. Like, can you start off by telling us where you're from? Like, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in New Mexico in a rural town. So my hometown is Aztec, New Mexico. There was 6,000 people total. My graduating class was like we went to kindergarten all the way through 12th grade together. So I do love and miss that hometown feel. But since then, I've lived in Arizona, in Oregon, in Washington, in North Carolina, and now I'm in Utah.
Wow, you've been all over the place. Were you licensed as a dental hygienist in all those places?
No, just in New Mexico, because when I went up to the Pacific Northwest, that's when I started doing coaching and consulting.
Ah,
And I moved to North Carolina to be an executive in the dental group. So I was the director of hygiene, but I did never practice hygiene. It was just more coaching and mentoring the hygienist. But I quickly moved from that director of hygiene position to I was the director of culture or people, and then director of operations, and then the chief operating officer when we sold that to a larger DSO. And then I
wow.
exited.
Okay, that was like a little fast forward for me. Let's start how did you get inspired? What made you want to be a dental hygienist? I always ask hygienists this question because everybody who I know think I'm a total weirdo for wanting to do this.
Yeah. So, I wish that I probably had a more honorable story than what I do. But when I went to dental hygiene school, I was already married and I already had a little boy, but I really wanted to go to college because got married when I was 19. And so it was one of those things that I really wanted to go to school. And but I was limited, like what's at the community college where I live. And really, it was like, what career can I make a decent living, but will also support what I really want to do and my greatest calling, and that was being a mom. So both of my parents were nurses, registered nurses. And so I was like, do I pick the nursing school or the dental hygiene school? And then I was like, you know what? I don't want to work nights, weekends, or holidays. I don't want to be on call. I think dental hygiene is it. So the reason I picked it may not be something that's super motivational or inspirational, but I absolutely just fell in love with the profession and the art and science of like what we do as dental hygienists, and still just like nerd out on all of it.
Yeah. And so after you graduated, well, actually, let's stick in dental hygiene school. While you were there, can you tell me about the way, like when I talk to my classmates from school, they just talk about how traumatized they were, about how hard it was. But I don't know, what was your attitude when you were there?
You know, so the same month that I was accepted into dental hygiene school was the month that my oldest son was diagnosed with autism. And so learning how to be a dental hygienist, I was also learning how to be a mom of a child with special needs. And so I think that I probably had a perspective that was maybe a little different, and had developed maybe some resiliency to that. Like hygiene school was absolutely really hard. You know, it was really tough. But I just have never, I always like a challenge. It's one of those things that I'm like the, you know, what is the saying that it's like the harder the view, the better the climb. And so I just really kind of love that idea of really challenging, and I love to learn. And so I was immersing myself. Now, there was absolutely times when I could not figure out how to get the distal of a premolar very well, or the angle was weird that I was like, I can't do this. But now you look back and you're like, oh, that was, you know, you just needed time and effort. But so yeah, I did an associate's program in New Mexico. And I had the most amazing teachers that I felt really, really well prepared when I came out.
Oh, that's great. It makes such a huge difference when you have teachers that really encourage you and support you and inspire you. Like when you're in that learning environment, you have to feel that way. Otherwise, you walk out there traumatized, you know? And I don't know. I remember, even though it was challenging, I'm like you, I like to be challenged. And it was probably one of the hardest experience I had, dental hygiene school. But when I left, I felt like I could really take on the world. I was
Do
just like,
anything.
let's go. Yeah, it really
Absolutely.
taught me how to stretch myself for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
And the friends that I made there were just like, there's a couple of us. So I don't know if you know Sarah Thiel.
uh,
Okay, so she's the creator of CE Zoom, which is like
oh
this
yeah, yeah.
platform. She and I sat next to each other in hygiene school.
Mm.
So anyway, I just have some friends and people that I really grew to love in that program.
Did you hold any leadership positions while you're in school? Like, tell me about that.
Yeah, you know, I was definitely in SADA. And so my junior year, I think I was the secretary or the treasurer or something. And then my senior year, I was the president of our SADA class. And then right after school, I mean, I was like so into all of that stuff. So right after I graduated, I got inside our state association and held some leadership positions there. But no, I absolutely loved that. And I felt like it gave me such a different perspective on our profession when I was understanding some of the government stuff and more association-wide stuff. So yes, I was the SADA president, and our graduating class, we gave away these like fun awards. And so mine was most likely to keep her plate full because it was just always, just kind of like now, it was always a bunch of stuff going on.
Wow. I mean, that doesn't surprise me. You held a leadership position and then you continued on in the leadership role right away, like without even waiting. So you said that you didn't actually practice in private practice or clinical hygiene. Like what happened next after graduation?
So I did practice for 8 years. And so I started with just one dentist, right? Private practice. I was the only hygienist. And when I was hired, the hygienist before had been gone for a while. And so, she didn't treat perio quite like, you know, I was taught to. I don't know if you've ever walked into those situations where suddenly you're a hygienist diagnosing and treating perio. And these people are like, oh, I just have been, you know, getting my teeth cleaned for every 6 months and it's always been fine. So I felt like I was up to my eyeballs in perio, but it was a really good experience. And so while I was in New Mexico, I worked at a couple of different offices. One of the I was full-time for that first full year with that one dentist, and then I moved to, it was a multi-doctor practice, but still a single location. Probably even in my experience to date, the most optimized practice I've ever seen. They were just very professional. There was 3 doctors and we had 12 hygienists, but 10 chairs of hygiene running every day. And we were booked out
Wow.
like once. So I think I learned a lot about operations and some of the other stuff within that practice. That's where I worked for the rest of my time in New Mexico.
That is crazy. I've never even heard of that. 12 hygienists and 10 at the same, like when we have triple hygiene in our office, it's like, hey, hey, the doctors having to do their checks, like, wow, that's crazy. The energy in there must have been intense.
Yes, it was. And on some days, there was only a couple days where there was 3 doctors. On some of the days there was 2. But I will tell you, like, I don't know how they did it, but I never waited very long for an exam. It never ran me over. Like they are like on roller skates. But yeah, they were super, super great practice to work for.
So, in that setting of working, is that where you kind of got the opportunities to kind of grow in that space?
I remember it was even before I had been practicing for a full year that I remember looking around my operatory and I asked myself, is this it? Because it was like things felt more natural and they felt more repetitive, and I wasn't like challenging myself or having to, like, it wasn't on this steep learning curve. And so I really wondered if like I should have gone to nursing school, if I'd made the wrong choice. And that was like kind of this really difficult thing to swallow. So I started to explore other options. So I actually started teaching at the dental hygiene school that I graduated from. I was a clinical like adjunct instructor, and then I taught tooth morphology one year and even added like a lab portion to it. And then I would do a public health rotation with the senior students and take them to like Indian Health Services or the nursing home or a couple of other places. So I really liked teaching, but at that point I was the same age or younger than some of the students. And there's always like some tough, like political type stuff, And so I recognized after some students sent me some really terrible, hateful, like text messages. And I wasn't the communicator then that I am now. So I think if I was put back in that situation, I'd probably feel different. But I tried teaching for a little bit. That's when I started. It's when I met Jackie Sanders a year after I graduated. And that's when I started speaking. And that was a lot of fun. So I spoke at ADHA and then RDH Under One Roof for several years in a row. I just started to explore other opportunities. And that's also when I went to Career Fusion, which is a conference that's not around anymore. But that's when I found my tribe of people, of these like crazy, ambitious hygienists that were just warriors and pioneers. And so I was inspired by them and was just like, I did training as a myofunctional therapist. I thought maybe that was going to be it. It was like I kept trying these different things, hoping that something would stick. And so about the time that my son was 13, he was getting much harder for me to take care of because I had been his primary caregiver. And what I loved about hygiene is I could work part-time and still be there with him. And now we'd had our second child. And but I just couldn't take care of him like I could. And my husband has a gift and can get him to do anything in the world and that nobody else can. So we were getting ready to build a house. And every time we went to go pick something out, I got really cranky. And I was like, this is not something that should put me in a bad mood. This should be something that brings a lot of happiness and hope. And then when I stopped and paused and started like evaluating my feelings, I realized I wasn't ready to build a house in New Mexico. I didn't want it to be our forever home. So my husband and I, we talked about it, and on a crazy leap of faith, we sold our house and everything we had known. He quit his job of 10 years and we moved to the Pacific Northwest. We moved into my brother's basement in Portland, Oregon, and I started hunting. The reason we went to Oregon was actually because they had kind of like independent practice for hygienists. And so I was hoping to have a mobile clinic that treated patients with special needs. But I knew that it was going to take a while to get my license and to get that all up. So I found this job on Craigslist that was for this dental company that did coaching and consulting. And so I applied, I got the job as a director of professional development and started working at this organization where we would coach dentists. So that's actually where I learned to fall in love with the business of dentistry. It was a really, really, really hard transition to go from clinician to looking at Excel spreadsheets and understanding data and being able to make sense of that data and how to like systemize or process my thinking of what I did with patients. And so it was a really rough, year or so as I integrated into this consultant organization. But then one of my clients was actually Dr. Eric Roman from North Carolina, and I just connected with him and his partner, Clifton Cameron, and I loved them. And I loved what they were doing. I worked with them virtually for about a year. And then that's when I moved to North Carolina, was with them.
Okay. I just feel like what an incredible opportunity that, you didn't have that mindset. You're going from clinician to data analyst. That's like a totally different brainwave, I think. And
Yes.
the fact that, that company saw that in you and that you had that and they hired you on, like, that is just incredible. I wanted to kind of go into the, the family dynamics, but I kind of want to just mention, like, how did you meet, like, specifically, did you meet Jackie Sanders? I feel like anybody who is introduced to her automatically gets, like, adopts a whole new family. You know what I mean? Like, she's such an amazing person, and just the aura and the energy field she has around her, like, people just succeed because of that wisdom and value that she brings. So how did exactly did you meet her?
So how did this work? Okay, so when I was a senior in dental hygiene school, I won our little table clinics, and I was going to go do table clinics at the National ADHA meeting. It was in New Orleans that year. So I graduated 2007. And so my partner ended up getting a job interview or something. And so I reached out to this woman at ADA, and her name was Danny. And I was like, hey, my partner's not coming, but I still want to do this. Can I do this? And so she and I just kind of chatted over email, and I still went to table clinics. But then the next year, there was a woman teaching a course to new graduates. And I was a new graduate that only had 10 minutes of that presentation. And so, but they still listed me as a speaker inside the ADHA like conference packet. Jackie had just started at Sunstar, and she was going to start working with KOLs. And so she saw that I was from Aztec or Farmington, New Mexico, and she spent time in Durango, Colorado, or grew up there, and that's 45 minutes from where I was. So she just happened to reach out, but we became fast friends. And I would say that many of my greatest opportunities in my career came because Jackie opened a door for me. And, she has this long list of people that she has mentored and elevated, but I think I was the first. And so anyway, we have this like really special relationship. And, even if I haven't seen her for a long time, when we get together, it just feels like,
not a day has passed. Yeah, she definitely is a special person. Just the energy field of love, dental hygiene love. Yeah.
Yes.
So I kind of wanted to go into now about the family dynamic. You said, your son, how many kids do you have total?
I have three.
3 kids. Okay. And your son, what is his name? The one that was diagnosed with autism? Ethan. So he was your firstborn. Yeah. And you were in dental hygiene school, like when?
Yeah. So he, again, like I got married when I was 19. And then 3 months later, I found out then I was pregnant with Ethan. So we had Ethan 5 days before our first anniversary. So it's just like a young kid, my husband and I figuring this out. And so anyway, I started my prerequisites, when he was little, but he developed normally, talked early, walked early, was very social. But about the time he was 22 months old, the brick walls went up. And so like you can even look at photographs and see that there's like a difference in just his countenance and his presence. But he stopped talking, and he also stopped like understanding things that we would say to him. So before I could be like, hey, let's go eat, and he'd jump up at the table, or go get your shoes, we're going to go to the park. Like he couldn't understand that anymore.
Interesting.
So it was about I complained that it was a 6-month-long process, but a lot of people wait years before they finally get an accurate diagnosis. And so, yeah, it was in April and in 2005, and we received his diagnosis on April 13th. And I think a couple weeks later is when I got my letter that I was accepted into the dental hygiene program.
Wow, that's a lot in a short period of time. My son is on the spectrum as well. His name is George. He is such a special kid. I remember seeing the signs as early as he was just a year old. Actually, why don't you come here? Say hi to everybody.
Okay.
He needs to brush his hair, but
Hello.
this
Hey.
is George. Say hi to everybody.
Hi.
So, what do you need so I can continue my interview?
I need the iPad.
An iPad. Okay, hold on one second.
Yep, you got it. Ethan has like 5 iPads and they're always close, so I
Thank
get it.
you.
All right. Did you want to say hi to? It's Malia. This is my daughter.
I think you and my daughter are only like a couple of weeks apart. She's going to turn 13 on March 29th.
Yeah, she's 10.
Oh, she's
Yep.
10.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I
Yeah.
was finding my last meeting, somebody else told me their daughter was about to turn 13. It was the other guy.
Yeah. Yeah, they're super close in age. They're just 13 months apart. They might as well be twinsies. But
What do they call, what is an Irish twin? Is that what it is?
yeah, basically, I mean, yeah, they're like besties, but they fight like a married couple. Yeah, but I just remember, noticing the signs as early as, a year old. He would focus on anything that spun, like the ceiling fan. He would just be like, ooh, and the wheels on the stroller, he'd focus on that. And so I was just like, I didn't know that was anything, but I was just like, because my nephew is also on the spectrum. He's different level of, but he's different level of functionality, but I just kind of noticed some similar traits, and I didn't actually get a diagnosis until he was three years old, right before pre-K. Actually, it was too late actually before I could go through the state. So I didn't get his diagnosis until right before preschool. Yeah. But it's just interesting, a lot of people, there's just not a lot of awareness out there. So a lot of kids don't get diagnosed until like 8, 9, and 10. And you need that early intervention so much. Like, can you tell me about how did you just dive into learning about it as soon as the diagnosis came?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I don't know if you're familiar with like the Colby index. It's kind of like, if left to your own devices, how do you solve problems? And there's 4 different categories. One of them is a fact finder. And so I'm a fairly high fact finder. But yes, I absolutely read every book I could get my hands on, trying to understand it, watching anything that I could. And it really helped me make sense of it. And I was like, oh, okay, like that makes sense. There is one book that totally changed the game for us, and it was called Changing the Course of Autism. And it was written by a guy who he was an ER doc, and his son was diagnosed with autism. And so his wife really started trying to figure out, what to do to help him. And he was fine with her like exploring different treatments or whatever. And then when she brought up the vaccine thing, of course, he was like, whoa, 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 like I'm an MD, like vaccines are totally safe, right? And anyway, so they started doing research and trying to figure out how to best treat their son. But what I love about this book is it was the first time I had ever understood the concept, and somebody had said, autism is not just a neurological disorder. It is a multi-system disorder. And so sometimes the behaviors that you see are actually due to an underlying medical condition. And if you treat that medical condition or that vitamin deficiency or whatever it is, then you can help deal with like the behaviors. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. And so anyway, gave it to my pediatrician, bless him, Dr. Preston Harrington in Farmington. He read the whole book. And then he was just so amazing because we actually started testing for things and looking for things that made a big difference, that we were like, oh, okay, all right, this is going on. Now, of course, we always want that magic cure, right? He's suddenly going to start talking, or he's going to be social, or he's going to stop, stimming or whatever. And that was never the case for us, but.
Yeah. I just remember just I was reading a lot of books too. And in my situation, their father, when we were together, we're not together anymore, but I just remember after he got diagnosed, I was like, I wonder if he has undiagnosed autism. And all of a sudden something clicked and I'm like, he's not diagnosed, but I'm just like, everything is starting to make so much sense. The way we would communicate with each other,
Yeah. I have a friend who her dad was just diagnosed and he's in his 50s or 60s. And so it's fascinating what's going on with their family and trying to figure this out for the spouse to be like, oh, that's why, this has been hard or, so anyway, yeah, it's crazy. I think that when you're a parent too, like sometimes when we finally get the diagnosis, we're like, or actually, let me say it this way. When you know the signs of something like autism and you see somebody else's child and you might recognize it in them first, when you're in the middle of it, sometimes it's so hard to see that like, hey, your kiddo's walking on their tiptoes and they have a bunch of sensory issues and they're not really socializing, like, but it's really hard for people to admit. It's really hard for people to see. And so sometimes maybe it is a medical, like the doctor's not asking the right questions, but sometimes as parents, nobody's fault. We just kind of look past those things because it becomes normal to us.
Yeah. But I do believe that people who do get like the child gets diagnosed, the parents I've met with child with special needs are just amazing people. I mean, they just go the extra mile, just pure advocates for their children. And it's beautiful to see, but I just feel like the awareness definitely, I feel like there's more and more diagnosis happening. Like, I feel like it's a lot more common than people think. And therefore the awareness is, growing, but there's still so much we don't know.
Yeah. I think when Ethan was diagnosed, it was like 1 in every 366 kids. And now I could be wrong, but I think it was 1 in 68, but it's more boys than girls. So 1 in 54 boys could be actually diagnosed with autism. And so, yeah, it's something to be aware of. I do love, there was this thing called the M chat. So it's M dash like a hyphen and then chat.com. It's a modified checklist for autism in toddlers. It's something I always shared in my CE. And so, stuff like that is available. I think that doctors are more aware of it. But what's interesting is that like finding providers who actually are passionate or engaged and want to treat your kids with special needs, because sometimes like they're just not interested.
Yeah, you have to find the right connection. There has to be a connection there. And I know like when I was, when I'm working in private practice, I've had number of patients come in either with parents that have kids on the spectrum and they're completely aware they're diagnosed. And I know when I get excited when those patients come in because I know exactly how to talk to them and their experience is so great, because I know, and I even go ahead and prep the parents sometimes, like, this is what you have to do before you come in, show them videos, show them, so they're, they know what to expect. And it ends up being a very great experience. And then I have, those other incidents where the parents probably don't know and the kid is not diagnosed, but there's obvious signs. But how do you raise that question, like, is that crossing the line? How are you going to offend this person? So I don't know, how would you handle that situation? Because I have come across that one time. I'm probably going to come across it more times.
I think that it's so hard because, it's asking or sometimes. So what I have also found is that a lot of people hide it because they feel like they've been rejected by other dental offices. And so I've had a lot of patients that, sorry, my camera's blurry, that they didn't alert us that they were on the spectrum because they had been told by others that they wouldn't see them, or they tried to go right to sedation. And so sometimes it might be like, oh, tell me about your family, or, oh yeah, I have 3 kids and my oldest one has autism. And so sometimes if it's like a fellow autism parent, are they going to open up that way? about it. And then, so sometimes that has been helpful, but if I'm not sure, it's just like, oh, hey, as one of your prevention specialists, I just want to make sure, are you taking, doing regular checkups with your doctor, anything, whatever. So I don't know, just like encouraging people to be seeing their providers and stuff like that. But yeah, it's tough because we're dental hygienists, right? And so
Yeah.
it's, like, I don't even know legally what we should be doing. So that's probably a good question for somebody who's still clinical, but yeah, it's really tough.
Yeah. I always struggle with that. Like, I'm like, I don't know if I should say anything, but I always love, even if I have the thought, okay, this person has those qualities. I know because of my experience, I know I can handle it. And it's always been a fun experience for me.
Oh yeah, they were always my favorite patients. No matter how difficult it was, I would rather do that all day long.
Yeah. And as a mother, I know we're talking about motherhood just because I'm an entrepreneur and I work a lot. I'm a dental hygienist too. And, I'm also a single mom and I have a child, that has special needs. So it's a lot, and I just love talking to other moms who are like that because, it's a lot to go through, but it's so special hearing those different stories too. So like with your son, do you ever notice like any special, I don't know, abilities that he has that, just things that he's very focused and interested in?
Yes, so he loves anything most Pixar stuff. So like Buzz Lightyear in particular. He likes Incredibles, he likes Nemo, Monsters Inc., he likes Veggie Tales and Blue's Clues and whatever. So anyway, sometimes he does like to draw and it's really fun. I'm really good at interpreting his drawings. Everybody has to ask me if they're not sure. They're like, what is this? Because it's almost like if you're watching a movie or a certain scene where sometimes he'll show the whole thing of it and sometimes it's like this very zoomed in and I'm like, oh, that was his belt like off the corner or whatever, and they're like, oh my gosh. So he does love to draw, and he's got some really great drawings which are super fun. But he also, like, what's amazing is like I'll tell you, he functions about the level of a 2-year-old. However, there's so much more going on there. And when you get to know him, you're like, oh, wow, okay, he understands way more than what it sounds like. But he loves to, like, I actually have found where he's created animation in his iPad. So he would go into his iPad into Minecraft and he would build like the background of a scene. So when he was recreating this VeggieTales scene, it was this kitchen table, it was like windows with a door, it was a hallway. And he takes a screenshot of that. So it ends up in his photo album. And then he goes to his drawing app, he opens up the photos, he brings that in, he pastes it on the background, and then he will draw on it. He'll take another screenshot and then he'll erase it and then he'll draw something else. And so one day I went up and it was like, it looked like he was drawing the same picture for the 50th time. And I was like, come on, buddy, like, what else can you draw? He literally giggled and started hitting the back button. And I was like, wait a minute, what is that? And it was like the tomato from VeggieTales, like bouncing across the stage, or he had recreated this whole scene of the yodeling veterinarian I mean, it was animation. And I was like, oh my gosh, like he Frankensteined all of these apps together. He loves to watch the special features, like when we used to have DVDs of how to make the movies and animation. And so I cannot get him to like sit down and make something. I have to catch it on accident, and he will work for days on something and then delete it all like this. And so because he doesn't think to show it, because it's not for anybody else, it's just for him. He's happy. So anyway, he does that. But I would also say what's unique about him is there's an interesting theory. A lot of people will say, oh, people with autism don't feel anything, right? Or they don't respond to anybody, and that's why they're in their own little world. And there was this thing called, I think it was hyper world theory or hyper something theory, that actually people with autism are much more receptive and they can feel what everybody else is feeling and they have to shut down because it's too much.
Yeah.
So Ethan has always, like, sometimes he's just on his iPad and he's not paying attention to anybody, but sometimes he will engage with people and sometimes it's strangers or whatever. And so I've had to, like, at first I kind of panicked and like pulled him away, because sometimes the people that he chooses, I'm like, you probably shouldn't be talking to this homeless guy, right? Or like trying, his attention. But I've learned to trust him, because what's fascinating to me is that when Ethan shares his presence, it's like there's something very like healing or loving, or it changes people. And so, for example, like at this point, we kind of had all these like crazy little miracles happen when he interacts with people, that I'm like, I'm just going to kind of let him go. And so we went to Disney a couple years ago, and this was our last day that we were there. And we always have a family caricature drawn. And so we got donuts. This was before he had celiac disease. So we got some beignets and gave him his iPad. And, it's 5 people that the guy has to draw. So we're there for a while. And so anyway, he's probably at this point, maybe 13 or 14. Anyway, he's probably a teenager. And this blonde girl comes over, and she's a teenager. And all of a sudden he pays attention to her, and he wants to sit next to her, and he keeps like pulling her close, and he's showing her his iPad, which he never shows anybody what he does. And so we were like, oh, like she's pretty cute. Like maybe he's just as attracted to her, like, whatever. And so we were like, hey, this is Ethan. He has autism, for him to give you this attention, you just must be really nice. And she was like, oh yeah, okay, it's great, it's whatever. And you could see like she kind of lit up, and she was over there engaging with him. So my husband happened to be over by the guy and was watching him draw, one of the kids' faces or whatever. And the girl's dad came up behind my husband, and he said, I don't think you know how much this probably means to her. And he said she was diagnosed with dyslexia, or not dyslexia, with she had seizures. What is it?
Like epilepsy.
Thank you. She was diagnosed with epilepsy, and she's been having a really, really hard time. And so we came today to try to bring her a little bit of joy. And I think your son just gave that to her.
Aww.
And so, like, we've just had too many of those experiences for it to be a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
So he like, what I love about him is he can't see wealth, he can't see race, he can't see class, he can't see, any of those things. And so he connects with people on this like energetic level, and he provides this pure, like what I would call Christ-like love, where it's like there is no judgment, there is no whatever, and it's just like, I'm going to give you some love because you need it today. And so, I have to remember those difficult moments when it's like he's tearing things apart or making a mess or stealing food or whatever. That I'm just like, this is so, that there are those blessings in there.
Yeah.
For sure.
I love that story. I was getting like goosebumps listening to that. That is just so amazing. Yeah. I remember one of my patients, she would, the repetitive verbalization, just, repeating the same thing over and over again. And then, but if you ask her, like, if you tell her your birthday, she can guess what day of the week that is. And she is never wrong. I was just like, what? Like, how do you do that? And I didn't even know what day I was about. I would just look it up on the internet, and I was like, oh, you're right. And then the doctor was just like, she's never wrong. It's so cool. Yeah, I love stories like that.
You ever read the book, Why I Jump, or The Reason I Jump, that was written by somebody with autism?
Mm-mm.
That one is a really good one. That one really helped me a lot. I did read Carly's Voice, and I loved it. It like helped me see probably more from Ethan's perspective, because everything else I'd read was like research and,
Mm-hmm.
The why and the how and the physiology, just all of that. But I did read, several books of like things that were written by somebody who's on the spectrum, that I felt like they gave me a much better perspective, and helped me understand Ethan. And so, yeah, I think it's called Why I Jump. It was a really good one.
I'm gonna have to look that up. My son, he's pretty high functioning, but he is a really gifted artist. Like he can really draw. Like when he was 5 years old, they put his picture, a watercolor painting of a chrysanthemum flower, in the High Museum in Atlanta. And he was like one out of 75 students in the whole county that got chosen to be put in there. And everybody was just looking at it going, oh, kindergartner painted that, he's just always, just from the beginning, just very gifted with drawing and painting. He can even do both hands at the same time. Yeah. And now, he really wants to be a YouTuber. And, my fear of, because I'm just like, oh gosh, that's at a door that I'm going to have to keep track of. That's more my fear, is not what he does is going to be amazing. But yeah, so that's like one of his goals this year, is to start a YouTube channel. And he wants to influence people and, teach people how to use his favorite apps.
I mean, is he going to do any videos on his drawing or his painting?
Yeah, I mean, he should. He has a lot. I have like folders full of his stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it's like, hey, I'm going to watch this boy on the spectrum paint something awesome. That's people go nuts over that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really amazing. He's actually very social for a child on I don't have a problem with him making friends, which is good, but he always has a sister too. The two of them, she's very protective of him. Both of them, they protect each other. And I always tell them, they're a team. They're, above anyone else, they're a team.
My kids are the same way. They are very protective of their brother. And there's 7 years between Ethan and Lila, and then there's 11 years between Ethan and Lincoln. And so, but it was fascinating to watch as Lincoln was born and Ethan was 11. As Lincoln became a toddler, I just remember thinking, like, right now he and his brother are the same like level of development, and very soon he's going to surpass his brother. And so it was like, watching this happen. But Lila and Lincoln, they are fierce protectors and advocates of their brother. And I think that what's been hard recently is recognizing that there are some things that aren't fair to them. It's just hard to have a brother with special needs at the level that he does. And so we have always been the family that's like, no, we're not going to let autism, slow us down. We're going to go on vacation. We're going to go to the movies. We're going to, do all these things that everybody else is kind of like hiding at home. And since COVID happened and he was diagnosed with celiac, we definitely become more homebodies, because he'll like steal food or grab something and eat it, and then it makes him sick, or he wants to tear apart the Oreo package. So I actually can't go out with him anymore. My husband can take him like to the store. We'll go to a restaurant, but we all have to be together. But unfortunately, at this point, like, I can't even take him out by myself, because it's hard for me to like keep him focused and not touching things or getting out of line. But we're considering, it's like, are we going to have to hire somebody to come with us on vacation that would support Ethan? Or are we going to have to like leave him at home and start taking some vacations? And so I think that we're just at that point where it's just really hard to take care of him when we travel or go places. And it's heartbreaking to think that he's not going to be with us, but at the same time, he wouldn't enjoy it.
Mhm.
So there's just things you don't think about until they're an adult. And then you're like, oh, this is way harder than when they were kids.
Yeah, my nephew, he is in his 30s now, and he functions at maybe the level of like a, I don't know, 6-year-old maybe, but he's so funny. But he's huge. He's like 6'2", you know what I mean? I mean, he can pick me up, and I'm heavy, and how tall is Ethan?
He is probably 5'11". So he's taller than both my husband and I, and he's probably 220 pounds. And so he is a big kid, but it's like, we were laughing because, so when my husband is around, behaves perfectly, right? I mean, perfectly, like pretty good. But as soon as my husband walks out the door, he just walks all over me. This is why. So like, he's this big old kid, and he's got this like cookie or something that I'm trying to get out, and he just holds me back, and I'm trying to reach around him and pull whatever and wrestle, and I'm like, you give me. It's one of my team members earlier this week, they were like, oh, they don't have any kids, but they're like, oh, my husband is sick and I'm having to take care of him and whatever. And I was like, oh yeah, my husband is sick too and got kids and family. And somebody was like, oh, well, you're the real champion. And I was like, actually, I'm spending all of my time trying to get the dog to not counter surf and Ethan to keep his hands out of his pants. Like, there is nothing heroic about what is going on in my house right now.
It's like popcorn everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, thank you so much for sharing. This is such a fun conversation. Just I just love meeting mothers who, have special needs children, because the stories are all, all over the place, different, and everybody has, their strengths and, their times of, where they just struggle, and, we have to stick together, and we have to be a community together, and just, hold each other up. What is your big dream for him? Like, do you ever think about that? Because, he's so young.
Yes. And, I think one of the things I've had to learn over and over and over again is that progress is painfully slow, but it's still progress. And so I will tell you, like, at this point, my very, very realistic dream for him, it would be awesome if we had, like, almost like an apartment above a garage that he could, like, he's always going to be with us, but does he have some little bit of independent living? And he may have to have a caretaker with him. In fact, I'm pretty positive. But if he could, I mean, it's like life skills at my house. It's like if he could shower himself, clean himself up after he goes to the bathroom, and brush his own teeth, that would be like major for us, because it is still like brush his teeth, give him a shower, clean him up after he goes to the bathroom. Sometimes he'll go to the bathroom and just pull his pants up, and then we have this whole mess. So in my house, it is very much like if he could just have some basic independent living skills, we would feel like freedom, just freedom.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he's happy, and he makes people happy, and most of the time he makes us happy. But it is really hard. So I think that our goal in life is, like, I'm always trying to work really hard and make as much money as possible, but it's not because I have this crazy lifestyle. I mean, I drive a 2015 Honda Civic, and it's because I just want to put enough away that if my kids have to take care of him, I know that it's so hard and it's a burden, but I don't want it to be a financial burden.
Yeah. And, that's a really great advice for anybody who has a child with special needs. I mean, you have to plan from the beginning and save for them. It's so important. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Guardianship before they're 18, so you don't have to pay a lawyer and go to court.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. You learn all kinds of things. Wow. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your journey. And, you're such an amazing mother. Oh my gosh. Like, it's every day is a journey, especially when you have a special needs child. But, you're doing it, and you are so amazing at what you do, professionally and as a mother. Yeah. So
I feel like my husband absolutely gets the credit, because he does most of the work, and I just get to, like, come in and snuggle and do whatever I can. But thank you. I do love my
well, you guys are both amazing. You're a team, Yeah.
team.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And I know a lot of people are going to be really inspired by this story. And, where can people follow you? Can you share your socials?
Yeah, absolutely. So on Instagram, it's Hygienist in Heels. On Facebook, I mean, everybody calls me Josey, but it's still under Josey Sewell. If you spell it right, I'm the only person in the world with that name, surprisingly, or at least spelled that way. So you can find me there, or on LinkedIn. And then, DEO has got all sorts of stuff. So the Dentist Entrepreneur Organization, you can find me there too.
Sewell. I totally pronounced your name wrong. I'm so sorry about that.
No, you're fine. When you look at it, you pronounced it like it's spelled. It's just one of those things. So I tell people it's Sewell. It rhymes with cool.
Yeah, you're cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I can't wait to see you in the summer. And those hygienists out there, learn from her. She's amazing. She will teach you things that you never thought that your brain could accomplish. So please reach out to her if you have any questions at all. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on Dark Horse Matters, the show about passionate people, and just inspiring those of you out there who are, don't know what your passion is. You never know. One of these stories could light a fire under you, and, you're going to take action and make it happen. So until next time, be passionate.